All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement-focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson Mackay.
And today's guest is James Peters Lifestyle. Mentor and mindset coach, James teaches that even through adversity, a new future is always available. He's certified as a Jay Shetty transformational mindset coach, and he has experienced the hardships of loss and debilitating grief that follows. Despite all the challenges he's faced, he came out of it as a new person and is teaching others how they can do the same. And now, let's get to the interview. But for people who maybe don't recognise your name, could you give a quick introduction? Because you've got a great story, but how do you explain what you do?
Yeah, so I guess a short snapshot really is, I guess now I operate as a transformational mindset coach. I'm Jay Shetty certified. I went through his program back in 2020 to 2021, took me about 12 months. And obviously that framework has really helped me now take that. And I really wanted to go into more of the mindset sort of coaching side. And really, I try to, help people, I guess, really change the context of how they view things of their past. Because you can never change the content, right? What's happened has happened. We've all got stories, we've all got backgrounds. But sometimes that can then define your life going forward. But sometimes if you just hold it and look at it differently and change the context, then actually you can look at it from more of an empowering perspective than disempowering. And that's really one of the key things I look for, is just looking to people like retraining, rewiring their brain, because we are default negative as humans. And then after the stuff which happened to us, it's just the way society is and the media, or what you want to plug into. You really have to be conscious, and I think most people are, what I would say is sleeping wide awake, just run by the patterns.
This guy,
which they've not been able to, or not had the knowledge to look at. So yeah.
I mean, was that what kind of attracted you when you started looking at your own story? And I think you said on your social media you wanted to be like a beacon, like a lighthouse for people who were struggling. Was that what got you into the Mindset Matters? I mean, when I got told by, I think, Brent Smith in my second ever episode, we're not our thoughts, you can change your story there and then. And he goes, you just change, you just decide you're changing. And I thought it needed years of therapy, depression, medication. How did you get into the mindset? And do you see a similarity in what people come and speak to you about?
Very much so. I think a lot of people are naturally stuck in the past there, and they believe that their thoughts, emotions are who they are. And we're not really, we're not taught in school how to think, or we're not even taught in school how to breathe, and these are really critical things for us as human beings, because if you can breathe properly through your nose and deep breaths, I do box breathing, but obviously Wim Hof's got his own breathing, you can really change your physiology and really change your state of mind very, very quickly. But if you don't know how to do that, then you can get stuck in this negative thought pattern cycle. And as I say, most of our patterns and programs that pick up as children, they're our parents, or our peer group at that particular time. Really, we're defined by that. But it's like I always say to people, you don't wear clothes now like you did when you were a 5-year-old. You look stupid. Well, why are you carrying around the patterns and programs which you picked up as a 5-year-old? Because as I say, most people, we're growing up, biologically we're getting older. We're different from where our body's different from 10 to 15 to 20 to whatever. but emotionally or spiritually, that's on you to grow up, right? That's not, you have to do that yourself. And that's why you do naturally see people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, still emotionally 18-year-old, 15-year-old, because
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I mean, I hear a lot of people saying that is like, I mean, for myself, I mean, I'm 40 next year, and I feel like I am still 18. And, people say, oh, that's great, you'll be living that when you're 70, 80-year-old. But I think I read somewhere about age regression and people saying it's you're stuck at the age of the trauma, and you start thinking, what happened then? And you start going, oh God, it was this, this, and this. But how do you deal with that? And then you don't really think, you think you're just living in the moment, but what you're not seeing is how your past dictates your current actions and your behaviors. How do we even start analyzing ourselves and seeing the, the disassociation from the behaviors, the personality, the parts of us that we think are like locked in stone, and start shedding those for a better version of ourselves?
Yeah, that's the journey of I guess what you call spiritual growth, or an awakening, and you need help to do that. I mean, it's you do need assistance. I mean, but a lot of it is driven. Firstly, personally for myself, was through meditation. That's really where it started. It was being able to really quieten my mind and really analyze my thoughts and start journaling the thoughts I was having, because most of your thoughts, even though you have like 50, 60,000 thoughts a day, they're pretty habitual. But you have to be able to understand where those sort of negative thought patterns are coming from, and be able to kind of track them and kind of stop them in their path, really. And a lot of it is around like positive mantras or positive frames, or just, it's an awareness to say, oh, I'm thinking like this, I need to to flip the switch type stuff, instead of getting caught in a negative thought pattern. Then you ruminate on that, and suddenly you have this whole story which is not even true in most cases. It's just kind of built up from you, because mostly the stuff you fill in all the emotion and the feelings on top of it, and it kind of just, it's a snowball.
I mean, yeah. Do we create the story that we tell ourselves? Do we give meaning to things where there isn't that there before?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe we create all the meaning, really. I mean, and it happens all the time. You can even in every day. You could come across a negative reaction, be it online, or you're walking down the street and someone looks funny at you, and you kind of build a whole story and meaning about what that is, when actually it's potentially just nothing. Or and so it's just being able to really be able to stop yourself from your mind running away with you, because that's what it is. The mind is a bit of a trickster. It's playing tricks on you. It's always we still have this brain which is thousands of years old and stuff, and we still got we still have the animal instincts within us, and we want to be kept in a sort of fear-based state. To be honest, we see stuff from a more of a fear-based perspective, but we create a lot of that in our own mind.
I mean, I've suffered with depression for on and off. And then I started finding out about, like, I knew I had OCD from, well, ex-girlfriends, mothers have told me, all sorts. But then I started finding out about POCD, pure OCD, how it's the thoughts rather than the one with the routines. I looked into CBT, NLP, and all these sorts of things. But when I went to the doctor, it was like antidepressants. What's your opinion on that traditional, like the health modalities that we typically see, the healing modalities? It's here's a bunch of chemicals, on you go. Nothing about lifestyle changes, nothing about growth as a person, like you're advocating, and all these amazing changes you help people do. But why do you think the NHS over in the UK and all these other places just go, here's some tablets, come back in 6 months? Why do we treat it like that, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's really down to, I guess it's just time, really. And I think a lot of doctors are there just to really help you not get better, rather than not get worse, rather than actually getting better. You don't usually go to a doctor and he kind of starts saying, well, you should do meditation, you should do breath work, you should do follow it more holistically. It is naturally, I've been in that situation. It is antidepressants. It is being labelled as PTSD and all this type of stuff. And I think those things that are dangerous because it's a label really. And then when you associate yourself with that particular label, like an OCD or PTSD, then you define yourself as your identity as a person with that, when obviously you're not. You have to separate yourself from that. And when you separate, it's again like diabetes or anything else, or someone who's got certain has been sort of diagnosed with some other sort of, you could even go as far as cancer as well, really. But because obviously I know a lot of people who obviously do the chemotherapy, but also do a lot of work from a meditation perspective, because they ultimately frequency beats chemistry. So it's about raising your own frequency. And so there's a lot in there, but that's a whole other subject. But I think we're from a NHS perspective or from a doctor perspective, it's just, here's this, bang, and then off you go type stuff. We're then really looking at some of they don't have the time to do that or the resources to do that. And I think it is dangerous because I do naturally, people who have come to me, have been on, certain antidepressants now for such a long period of time. And it's very difficult to change that.
You start to rely on it, don't you?
Yeah, because they do, because it's a need, and you see that now. Obviously, we live in a culture of instant gratification. Everyone wants a quick fix, and they don't, in a lot of cases, want to take the time to actually do the inner work, and that's really the journey. Is going more inwards, because all the answers are within you, but you have to be able to you go to the Delphi temple. It's know thyself, and that's the thing. It's like, do people want to sit and actually really start understanding themselves? And a lot of people, find it massively uncomfortable to do that. Every time they're alone or they're quiet with their mind, they'll pick up the phone. They're looking for that distraction because they don't want to deal with that situation. And obviously, medication from a doctor helps that, because it's a quick fix, or it's a plaster on a wound.
Well, I certainly, when I started them, I was like, oh, this is amazing, because it was affecting my biochemistry at the start. And I was like, oh, and I could see myself 50 miles an hour. But then after a while, you just settle. It kind of it's like beginner gains in the gym. You get a wee bit of a buzz because you're completely new to it. And then suddenly it's like, oomph. And if you don't put anything else into it, you don't change. And I need to go and do something creative. I need to be physical. I need to be outside. I know these things, but I can't rely just on the tablets. I love that you said that when you went to Bali, you had this spiritual awakening. You kind of found yourself, you started asking yourself the right questions because you knew the answers within you. What did the journey to Bali teach you? How did it change you as a person, or start you in this amazing journey you undertook?
Yeah, so I guess slightly back from that, in the fact that so obviously went through some life-changing situations in 2017. Lost a dad, lost a son, accused of a crime I hadn't done, and all that type of stuff. Went into a criminal trial. When there's a lot of stuff going on in a very, very short period of time. So once that had gone away to a certain extent, my life really started to. Life had changed then. Obviously, when you go through those three things very, very quickly, life was always going to be very, very different. It can never be the same. And obviously, by then I'd started meditation. I'd started to, do a little bit of the inner work, but only at a very thin layer, top layer type stuff. I didn't really know what I was doing. And then naturally, I just got more inquisitive and more curious. Prior to 2017, I hadn't even picked up a self-development book or anything like that. I just, so I started doing stuff on YouTube, and I came across things like Abraham Hicks and Dr. Joe Dispenza, people like Les Brown. And I just continue to learn. And 2019 was probably that time when the job I was doing, I quit. I wanted to take some time out. I took 6 months off. I started doing some affiliate marketing. But with that time off, I went to Bali. I went to a few places, but Bali was one of them. And I went on my own, went for a couple of weeks, took a few books, like people like Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning, obviously the books by Ant Middleton, obviously SAS Who Dares Win. Took those books, just started reading, consuming them, and started to visit Bali as well, go to some of the spiritual sites. And do you know what? Just without really consciously knowing it, something just changed there. I came back and I wasn't like a completely different person, but I was just like, right, I kind of get it now. I was doing all this work and then suddenly things just started to make a lot more sense. And I also have the David Goggins book, Can't Hurt Me. And I read that. And I remember I got back from Bali and I was into running, I was into fitness, but nowhere near to what extent I was now. And I bought a weighted vest and I just started running. I just started running in a weighted vest. And obviously the rest is history from that perspective. But yeah, going to Bali, I think just taking some time out on my own in a place which is beautiful. I mean, it's so peaceful as well where I was. And I was just able, I think, just to get a bit more quieter and do, meditate and do some inner work and just it. So yeah, ultimately things, even though for a short period of time, I came back and things had changed.
Because, I mean, it's certainly something I know a lot of people fear is being quiet and listening to the silence or, getting into that moment of listening to the inner voice and actually just leaving the distractions. I mean, when I found you on social media, I was like, this guy's amazing. He gets it. And then when I read your backstory, I was like, how is he so strong? How is he mentally so strong to be there for other people, to help them, because that would crush so many lesser people. And you're using your pain as a kind of a way to help others. And I struggled with like loss of grandparents. I had relationships that broke me when we ended, and I had like put that part of my story. But how on earth did you find that inner strength to overcome that fear of making that change? When you could have crumbled at that point, but you seem to use your pain as a motivational tool almost. Where do you think that came from?
I mean, I do say pain to purpose, and I don't, and because I wasn't like the person I am today, the person you see on social media, or the person obviously speaking to you today, wasn't this person like 4 or 5 years ago. I was super not confident, massively insecure, low self-esteem, really high anxiety. I was a very private person as well. And so I've really done a 360. I mean, I was into exercise, but like I've done a few marathons and I exercise probably 2 or 3 times a week. And I think, as I say, that Goggins book, I think just changed everything. I just was like, wow, look, like this, because he talks about the 40% rule and obviously the cookie jar and all these different things. And I was just like, yeah, there's just so much more here to what I can achieve. And I just thought, you know what? I can't let this define me. I've still got a long way to go. And at that time, obviously for that for a couple of years after, even throughout the whole process I was going through, like I didn't want to be here. Like I would have committed suicide easy if I probably had enough. You could probably say balls to do it, to be honest with you. I mean, I thought about it, I planned it, but I never really went through with it. I only got close maybe once before. And I just thought, you know what, there's got to be something beyond this. There's got to be a reason why I went through this. I just thought there's got to be a reason. And then I just started digging, really, and just started, just doing the work, really, the inner work, and spending time alone. I've spent a lot of time alone, which I used to, for a long time, hate. And now I enjoy that period. And I do talk about that, going dark and just working on myself and just getting better, and put myself in difficult situations, challenging situations, and see how I handle it. And that's why I tried to, as mentioned a little bit earlier, to try to do the joggle, the run this year, just to see how I'd cope mentally. Obviously doing this Navy SEALs thing month. I've done stand-up comedy, which I would never have done 4 or 5 years ago. Put myself in really difficult situations to see how I can react in those situations. Because I want to show people. It's not for me personally; it's to show others really that anything is possible. And I was this person who was this way 4 or 5 years ago, and now is this person, and I'm not special. I've just sort of been committed to change, really.
I mean, that's what I always say to people. It's like if you're not making something different, you're going to stay exactly where you are. And it's like you're saying about going and doing the comedy. It's putting a bit of a challenge in front of yourself to build up that resilience. So hopefully, when you need it, you've already built up that kind of inner strength, that inner kind of mental toughness. But I think you said a quote somewhere where it was whereas I had to write it down. You said, if nothing changes, then nothing changes in our life. And I loved that. It was so hard hitting. It was that moment of like, that's so true. And I think that's the thing is we think we can change by getting a relationship. We can change by finding somebody new or going and, just going to the gym, like without a purpose, without a plan. What kind of habits should we be putting in place to do this inner work? What did you find really helped? Was it journaling, meditation? Did you find going out and spending time walking in the sun, for example? I know a lot of people find that helpful. What habits did you start doing in these inner works that were so effective?
I mean, probably the first one was meditation. That was the first thing I when I started seeing a counsellor who very much was strong in kind of the Buddhism faith. So she was talking about meditation, and I hadn't done any meditation at that particular time, but I knew I needed to because I was about to obviously go into a criminal trial, about all that type of stuff, and be obviously in front of a jury, and I couldn't have gone on with the way I was because I was just I was so anxious and I was just lost at that time. So meditation was the first thing which really changed a lot. And I do remember vividly now, even 4 or 5 years on, even though so much has changed, but I remember obviously I had a legal team, and I remember sitting with my legal team a couple of weeks after I'd started meditation, and they just were like, wow, you're just a different person. Because I was just a lot more calm, I was a lot more confident, I was a lot more forthright with how I used to say stuff. Whereas I used to go in before and they used to ask me questions, and I was all over the place because I was just in a rabbit in the headlight, really, because there was so much going on, so much had happened over a certain period of time. I couldn't get it. My brain just couldn't compute what was actually happening or going on. But obviously through meditation, I was able to really quieten everything down and then sit, take deep breaths, and was able to be a lot more coherent, and I was a different person. So I do remember them vividly, like, wow, you completely changed. So meditation was the first one. And I used to do 2 to 5 minutes a day. I always say to people, if you want to change anything, obviously your habits change, but you've got to start small, micro goals. You can't go from no meditation to doing a Joe Dispenza half an hour meditation. You're just not, it's not going to work. You just need to start 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and just keep building on those habits. But journaling, I think, is great. Gratitude, I think, is the biggest one. You've got to, when you wake up in the morning, if you can just be grateful for 2 or 3 things. But again, people do understand the gratitude, but the problem with it is that you've got to have brain and heart coherence. That you've got to be working in tandem. A lot of people just think, oh, I must do my gratitude because I've been told to do it, and they write a few things in their journal. But it's like a tick box exercise. Your journal doesn't care about what you're grateful for. You have to feel it. You have to feel, and if it's grateful for the warm bed you're sleeping in, or the cup of coffee you're drinking, or the water, or the running water, you have to feel that. But gratitude is really great. Journaling is great because you can understand your thoughts. A lot of the times you can write stuff down. It really gets stuff out of your head, and which is a lot easier because then you can analyze it a lot more and go really and sort of say, actually, that makes no sense, or that's not true. But when it's in your head, it just spins around and you start adding more and more on top.
Would you feel like you were rising above it? Because I used to think I couldn't see the mist for the fog, or whatever that saying is, when I was stuck in it. But when I felt like I was doing the inner work, I felt like I was rising above it. and seeing like the battle going on, but from the top of the hill or something. Did it feel like you were actually in control of it rather than being reactive? You were being proactive.
Yeah, you can be in a lot more controlled. You can actually understand it's a good analogy what you have there, because you can say like you are the mountain and just your thoughts are the clouds, and so you're in, and that's really what it is. Really, your thoughts are literally the clouds in the sky. They come and go. It's like but obviously if you attach onto them, then suddenly that's really when you generate the emotions and your feelings. And then suddenly that your life is defined. But so journaling is a huge one, because you can really start writing stuff down and really getting stuff out of your head and really start analysing your thoughts and understanding really those patterns and programs, and really understand where is it coming from. So it's really important. So yeah, meditation, gratitude. I think breath work is probably something which doesn't get talked about a lot. It does a little bit more, but it depends who you follow. But I do box breathing, which is obviously you've got the Wim Hof, but you can change your physiology, because a lot of people don't really like the most other people like chest, or we call mouth breathers or chest breathers. Like it's very short, whereas it's not that real deep breath in. And if you can take some real deep breaths, you can really calm your nervous system, and really you can really get yourself out of feeling anxious or quite easily, really. But people aren't taught about breath work, and if they're not really following the right people, or just don't have the knowledge, like I didn't have the knowledge 4 or 5 years ago. We're not taught how to breathe, which sounds ridiculous, but it's how we keep alive.
So I mean, I interviewed David Jackson. He had basically learned how to rebreathe himself away from a brain injury when he was a rugby, and now he's a breath coach. And that's what he was saying. It's like, it's amazing the psychological, the physical differences that can happen by learning to breathe correctly. Like nasal breathing rather than mouth breathing. I've tried box breathing when I'm super stressed, and you suddenly feel all the tension go from the top of your chest to, oh, that's how I use my lungs. That's how I use breathing into my diaphragm. So, how did you go about dealing with like the anger and things like that? How did you learn to kind of go, no? Because I've had people write to me and say, since the Me Too movement, for example, one guy was saying he was worried that he had maybe overstepped the line with an ex-girlfriend. I've had guys, I interviewed Rob Kelly, Dr. Rob Kelly. I don't know if he's an addiction specialist, and he's saying, don't tell me the things that you're happy to tell people. Tell me the things that keep you awake at night, the things that you're taking to your grave that terrify you that somebody else would find out about. How do we deal with, like, somebody was talking about wanting to go beat up their their ex-partner's new husband because they were so jealous and stuff like that? And, I was kind of saying it because I could see where they're coming from, and you could see them calming down in their emails. The stress was kind of going as they had somebody to speak to. And that's why I'm so glad there's people like you out there. How do you learn to deal with such raw emotion, especially when you were found not guilty? And how do you deal with these issues? Like, how do you learn to kind of, no, that's just a process. That's my emotions just running wild. That's not me. I'm James. I can overstep this. How did you learn to deal with that? Because it's an amazing thing to do.
It's literally to separate. I was able to sort of separate myself from the actual what I was going through, or what I was naturally feeling, because obviously there was different emotions, different feelings coming up there, and I can definitely resonate with a lot of people, obviously what you've taught there, because it's a natural thing to feel those emotions. It's not so you don't want to suppress that, but you just want to sort of be able to sort of differentiate yourself from those emotions, and be able to have tools in place. And that's where things like breath work and meditation and even journaling is very key, because sometimes we can make reactions or react to a certain situation without that pause, and that's where a lot of people naturally have those issues, especially if there is those anger issues, which usually anger issues comes from something from the past or school or this type of stuff. There's a lot of patterns on programs where people have picked up stuff, and then they become it goes back to sometimes the school analogy to a certain extent. Like someone's in class at school, and they they tell a joke and everyone just laughs and roars, and there's suddenly this person ultimately comes like the comedian, and that's really kind of how they're defined at school and defined for the rest of their life, and the one who's drinking the beer and telling jokes, blah blah blah. And there's someone else who does something in class and suddenly gets laughed at, and suddenly that's it, they go into their shell, or they turn to anger, like they've lashed out, they hit someone, and then they realize that people back off and don't react to them, and then that's a pattern and program. They realize that actually, if I use violence or against people, then people don't react that way to me or won't say certain things to me. And suddenly you've got Mr. Angry, and then suddenly that Mr. Angry is suddenly an adult. So a lot of it is defined in the past from school, but it's being able to separate yourself from those emotions and just be able to breathe and have that pause to say, even though this is how I'm feeling, this is how I'm reacting, this isn't me, this isn't who I am, and be able to really sort of differentiate from.
No, it makes a hell of a lot of sense, because they were like, in some of the emails, obviously, I won't say who like wrote them and that, but they were saying things like that you're the first person I've ever told I feel like I can actually write this out, and and I've seen it in other like Reddits and things like that, and people kind of going, "Oh, I didn't realize," but then I'm now worried that my behavior might have been this, and and they're like, "Oh, but I don't know how." Like they use the anonymous, I think it is, on Reddit to put it out there, and I was like, that takes balls, because I remember you saying in one of your posts, whatever we're afraid of and we don't deal with owns us. If we don't tackle it head on, and we, like you're saying, like we make these things part of our story. Oh, everybody said I'm a clown. Oh, I'm not going to go in it. You don't be so stupid. You're an idiot. So we start tagging ourselves in, thinking we're not smart. So we make that part of ourselves. Did you find a way to look at your past and go, there's that red flag, there's that red flag? Was that coming through the journals, or did you build systems just to give yourself self-love and compassion, and just to kind of realize that you're an amazing guy, that was just some bad stuff that happened and you can change and be better?
Yeah, I think exactly. I think I made some naturally, obviously, wrong decisions in the past, which kind of ultimately led me to where what happened to a certain extent. But it's being able to, kind of, I think that one of the biggest things is just like sometimes we're so hard on ourselves as humans. Sometimes it's just like to forgive ourselves. Forgiveness is one of the biggest things we can do, not for ourselves really, is because people get caught so much, and one of the most destructive emotions is guilt. Maybe people who feel guilty about what they've done in the past, or what they could have done, or what they should have done, and have that whole story like, oh, I should have done this, or oh, I should have done that, and they spin their wheels for years on end. But guilt is so destructive in the fact that it's you against you. Like you can't change anything, and if you can't get over that and forgive yourself, you're just going to be on a hamster wheel to nowhere. And ultimately, guilt is probably such a destructive one. But I think for myself, I was always looking at, like, I just looked at and analysed my life, or where I was going. It could be relationships, it could be work, it could be fitness, it could be like some of the pillars of what we look for in life. We've all got to play the health game really, or we're gonna have to pay the price. Like obviously the money game we have to play, and relationships we have to play. They're like three things we have to get, because we always have to get on with people, and that. So, and I looked at those, and I was really kind of lowered, put myself in pretty a low category in most of those, to be quite honest with you. So I was like, what I need, these are the three things I have to master. I have to master these, because otherwise, they're going to own me, and I'm not going to get anywhere. So those are really really started how I started to work, and I just became to a point where I wanted to. As I said before, you go to the Adelphi Temple, know thyself. Is that is the journey? It's journey within. And I think for my life, everything up until that moment, everything was outside of me. It was the relationships, it was the cars, it was the money, it was the jobs, it was the clothes, it was the trainers, it was everything I was looking for everything outside of me to make me feel better, and none of it worked. It all just patched over, really basically my who I was as a person. And so it was only really when I actually started saying, actually, the understanding that the journey is always in, and you have to go and find who you are. And one of the biggest things I did, because I had no self-love really for myself. Like I never really, I even struggled to say I loved other people, and so one of the biggest things I did is I wrote 25 things which I loved about myself, and I just read them in the mirror all the time, because that opens up your soul.
Because I mean, that is something that is like, self-love is such a great tool. And these guys were writing to me and they were like, you're the first person I've told. And I thought, it's terrifying that, I remember, where was that I read? It was something like 74% of men admitted they didn't have a best friend, or they didn't have a close enough friend that they could go, I fucked up, or I'm struggling with this. I mean, I've felt suicidal. I felt down, and and I was thinking I could never admit some of the intrusive thoughts that go in my head, like the horrible shit that comes. And I was thinking, I can't say that. People have like fucking beat me up or something, and we feel alone, don't we? We feel like we're completely isolated from everything. It's a horrible thing. I mean, and we're told to be strong and macho and masculine and deal with your shit, and you just be the boss of everything. And it's so stupid. I mean, I love how you talk about not just the past, but you look at the concept of future self. You go, how you can deal with the future version of yourself. Could you go into a little bit about that? Like, how do you use the concept of future self to help the present self deal with the shit from the past?
Yeah, and it's great. It's a great question. It's around, I mean, I think I'm always building the future version of myself. I'm always visualizing that every day. Like, what's that person look like? How do they talk? How do they react to people? What do they look like? What's their demeanor like? And so you're always connecting me today into that future version of what I want myself to look like. And so it's one of the biggest things I think I help people with, and naturally people come to me is like, what do you want your future self to be? Because if you don't have that vision of who that person is, then how can you connect to that person? How can you then set goals or habits in place today which take you closer to that person you want to be? It's so important to build that. So that's really kind of how I work on a day-to-day basis with myself. It's always being able to say, right, who do I want to be in 3 months' time? Who do I want to be in 6 months' time? And just keep visualizing and connecting to that person.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you don't have your own plan for what you're going to do, society, family, girlfriends, whatever, they're going to give you, or they're going to dictate how you live your life. Did you think that was sort of linked into your affirmations, the self-love, the compassion that you give yourself, like with the list of things? Did you kind of go, this is who I want to be, and then look at your affirmations and say, I love this about myself, and then find that as you were more grateful, as you're more like kind of taking the chance to see from over the top of things rather than dealing with the emotions, you could actually start going, okay, I want to be stronger in this area. Okay, I'm going to work on this. I will fix this issue. Did it let you kind of link in everything? By seeing where you wanted to be, you could reverse engineer and find the ways, the habits you needed to fix, the healing you needed to do to become the guy you are now?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is you have to, I guess you have to change your energy, you have to change your frequency. We are kind of energy beings, and so like when you show up to a conference or to meet new people or anything like that, your energy shows before you do, and you can tell it now. Like I'm quite connected a little bit more on the energy side, and you can feel the energy where someone is operating at quite a high frequency, and you can tell when people are at very, very low frequency. You can just really feel it. And I remember I was very conscious around that. I became very conscious, like I had to raise energy. I had to raise frequency, and obviously all that comes really with being able to, be a lot more, confident in yourself. And that's what I came back to, like driving in those positive affirmations, driving in that positive self-talk, really being able to have had a negative thought or thought pattern or something came up where, I would quickly interject that very, very quickly with something positive. Like, I can do this, or everything, every day and every way I'm getting stronger or better, and all this type of stuff. I just kept on plowing myself with these tools, because that's really how you change. But a lot of it is then you start building the confidence, you start building your energy, you start building your frequency, and you can only change. Like, no one can change until their energy changes. You cannot be the same person and try to change that person, because it's not going to work. You actually have to fundamentally become different. You have to be a different type of person, different type of energy.
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
It makes a lot of sense, and it's so inspiring. I was sitting there thinking, like, yeah, I need to fix this, I need to fix that. I can feel, like, just 2 minutes in speaking to him, like, I can see why this guy's helping so many. You're so, like, there's just something about that, your energy that kind of lifts your own energy. You kind of bring it out in other people, and I don't know if you can teach that. It's probably why you're such a successful coach. Is this part of the thing of, we need to stop expecting and we need to start accepting? We need to kind of, instead of thinking the raise will make us happy, having kids will make us happy, we can actually just stop and go, this is who we are now, but this is what we need to do for ourselves. We need to sleep better. We need better exercise. We need to eat healthier. We just need to accept where we are, but start adding in the self-care, the gratitude, the sleeping better, the eye mask, the tranquil baths, if that's your thing. All these, we just need to actually show ourselves some self-love. Do you think guys struggle with that?
I think 100%. Yeah. I mean, as I say before, everything, I wasn't at all. And I still got friends, from, obviously, you go back, to university and all that type of stuff, who, and very, very different. We're very, very, very different. I've gone on a completely different path, and they've, they stayed, doing what they do because of their families and kids and all that type of stuff, and that's fine. Like, you accept, that's those situations. When you do accept those situations, it actually makes things a lot easier. I can still, hang out with them, but I don't drink anymore. So, and I do all this ridiculous exercise, and they don't really exercise at all, or very, very little. But we're still, that bond is still there. It's just different. It's just a different situation. I think it took me a while to accept that. I think before I was kept on going, I don't really want to go to see them because blah blah blah. They made all these excuses. And then actually, just once they accepted the fact that they're there, I do this, and then I could just go and have fun and just still have, just still be who I want, be authentic. I think that's what I always say to people. One of the biggest things you can be in as a human being is authentic, not try to keep being this, like, chameleon trying to fit into all these different situations. Just you be who you want to be, and accept yourself for that. And if no one accepts you as that, that's their loss. Because you're not going to be everyone's tea. But that's what naturally, as people, what we try to fit into situations, and what I've been told, like what we call goop, or good opinion of other people. We kind of define ourselves in trying to fit into certain situations, when actually, when you start doing the inner work, you start understanding yourself, start being more confident, a lot more self-love, you can go out and be who you want to be and be your authentic self. And if people like that, they'd like it. If people don't, you'll resonate with the right people. The right people will resonate with you, and the people who don't won't. You won't, and you're cool with that because you're confident and authentic in who you are as a person. So, but that takes a lot of that takes inner work. That just doesn't happen overnight. You have to, you have to do that work to, to get to that stage.
I mean, that really hit home because when I was younger, I spent a lot of time going to the pub with friends thinking, looking around going, why am I here? I don't like these people. I don't like what we're talking about. I don't like sitting in a pub drinking. Like, I certainly would not have done the podcast. I certainly would not have, jumped out an airplane for a cancer charity. I would have never have done all these amazing things I've done if I had stayed that person. But I had to sort of step away and go, I'm not being authentic. I'm not being myself. How did you advise people to start in this journey of authenticity? How can we actually step up and go, no, that's not me. I might have done something bad in the past. I might be seen as a class clown at school. I might be whatever it is. How can we actually stand up and go, no, this is who I am now? Is it writing out who we want to be and then finding out how to get there? How do we start becoming authentic, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I always say to people, a new future is always available. It's always available, and it's being able to understand that, and be able to say, right, who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? What sort of person do you want to be? And these are the things of how you have to get quiet, go inward, and really start journaling to understand who do you want. And most people are obviously working jobs they hate. They're with partners they don't like. They hang around with people they're not interested with, and they're just sort of bumbling through a life experience when it's kind of and I've done that, so it's not as there's no judgment there. It's just being able to say, right, and sometimes we need a wake up call. I had a massive wake up call, and with that, obviously, I turned my life into a different situation. And sometimes we always have a defining moment in our life, be it early on, be it later on. There'll always be a moment where you'll get the sign it's time to go and do something different. Yeah. And it depends really in that moment what you decide to do and how you take that, that message, because it always comes to us. And it was one of the biggest things I think I learned probably from a Dr. Joe Dispenza podcast, which I listened to, and obviously his books are amazing anyway, but Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself and You Are the Placebo, amazing books. But one of the podcasts, he was talking to someone, I think it was Lewis Howes, and they were talking, and he was just there comes a moment when you'll have to go inward to find the answers, and you'll get the message, and it just depends if you take that message, and how you take that message. And that's really what I say to people, you can change, you can be different, but you have to do the work. You have to be prepared and put in the effort and the time to know yourself and know what you want to do and where you want to go. And that takes, that's really where I come in and help people, because you do need help. Yeah. And I got help to do. I didn't do this all on my own, obviously. I've had coaches in the past, and obviously therapy, counselors, all this type of stuff. You can't do it, on your own. It's like having a personal trainer, isn't it? You go to the gym. You can do stuff on your own at the gym, but are you committed? Are you pushing yourself hard enough? Are you kind of motivated? You might go, whereas you have a personal trainer who's on you. You're gonna see differences. You're gonna see a change in your body because they're gonna handle your nutrition. They're gonna handle all these different things, and you're gonna be 4, 5, 6 months. You're gonna be a completely different, different person. It's the same. It's exactly the same with your mindset. You can't meditate one day a week and expect it's going to be changing. Or I say to people, you can't do your meditation, do your visualizations, do your journaling, but then watch the news and watch EastEnders and all that type of stuff. You're completely sabotaging, because
you feel your energy going up and then down when you start the destructive behaviors.
Yeah, your inputs shape your outputs really, and that's where you have to. It has to be whole round lifestyle choice. You can't really do one and not the other. But yeah, I always say to people like, what media or what are you consuming? Because that's super important, especially in this day and age now. Because if you're not conscious of what you're watching, you are getting programmed. Because as humans, we are programmed by design. Like we can't stop that. And even say, "Oh no, but I don't really watch it," or I can kind of just listen to it, because subconsciously it's going in. So you have to be super cautious, especially now, because you see it all the time. Like people are plugged into fear, plugged into because they're watching too much of the news, mainstream media.
I mean, I see a lot of that. Like, people are now sort of saying things like, you're going to keep getting the same message. You're going to keep getting the same problem. You're going to date the same people. You're going to meet the same people until you learn the lesson. And I know some people say it's the universe, some say it's a deity, etc. But I've noticed that is like until you deal with that BS that's holding you back, you're only going to date the same kind of people. You're only going to make the same kind of friends or the same kind of have relationships with people, if it's friends or whatever. Do you think that's the point, is until you find that point that you say, fuck it, enough's enough, I need to change? How do we know that's the moment, do you think?
Yeah, all change is in the mirror, and that's always the most difficult, because the most difficult patterns and programs to spot are the ones in the mirror. But yeah, you're 100% right. You can continue to date, try to find the next person, but you say you still have the same situations, but just different partners, or you have the same friends, and eventually the same things happens, or the same finances. We see it a lot now with finances where people keep buying courses or keep buying things to be able to, to maybe generate more income or generate a side hustle or this type of stuff, but are still earning the same money or even less because they haven't changed the person in the mirror. So they kept us well, at least if I keep throwing money at it, if they have the money to throw at it, it's just, and it's like, I'll get a dating coach, or get this and that, blah blah blah. I get this help here, I get blah blah blah. But you're not changing the person in the mirror. You're just going to have the same experiences, and that's really the biggest challenge, because that's you against you by doing the inner work, and being able to understand that message. And that's the challenge we have in today's hour, because we're very much plugged into instant gratification. I mean, people ask me all the time, give me a shortcut. And I was like, there is no shortcut. There isn't a shortcut. If you think you can do it quicker than me in 4 or 5 years, by all means, go for it. But there was no shortcut. No, I had to sit in some incredibly uncomfortable situations in myself, because there isn't a shortcut, but everyone wants a shortcut. Yeah. So it's just a challenge.
Well, that's the thing. You can order a date nowadays. You can order a takeaway. You can order a pick-up at your house. There's no longer that challenge. There's no longer that thing of working for it. We all expect, like, I'm going to become a reality TV star. Well, why don't you become a nurse? No, I'm going to become an influencer. I'm going to become an Instagram star. And I'm like, okay, here we go. But why? I just don't get that kind of logic. And I really like this idea of writing down and tackling the shit that's holding you back, to make sure that the present version of yourself then starts loving yourself, has the compassion to then go and become the person that you want to be, your future self, to meet that goals. But how do we know we're going on the right path? What growth, what maturity do you expect to see in a client, in somebody going in this path? How do we know we're going the right way, and not just because it's our mother told us to go for that job, or our friends are telling us to do this? How do we know we're going in the right path for ourselves?
I think from a soul perspective, or you kind of, when you're waking up, your heart woken up, your kind of your inner being, or you could be like the infinite intelligence, or as you say, the divine, or even God or anything like that. God isn't a person in the sky, right? It's kind of within you, and that's why you have to wake up that that within you, and there's a sign within you where you feel different. Your inner being you start to feel things. You start to have a warmer sensation, and you start to build in that intuition a little bit more, which people naturally have gone away from, or there's no trust. Whereas it's everything is within you, and it's being able to open that up a lot more than being able to run by anything external and patterns and programs. You kind of just feel it. I always say to people, note things down. Always. That's why I always say carry a journal, have something, because there's always signs that things are going in the right direction. Things are happening. You might meet someone, you might have a great conversation with someone. It might be really small. You might get a little bit of money come through from some way. Like, there's always those little signs where you're on the right path, but you have to be aware enough to notice them, because then you can note them down a little bit in your journal to say, like, had this experience today, or that experience today, or and it's just being a little bit more. I always say to people, like, an awareness, really, and help others. Anyone can really help people now. I mean, sometimes if I go into London, and I would always be conscious to give something to a homeless person, or just generate that smile, generate that feeling, generate that something, because we can be naturally now as humans. How many times you see people walking around with their phone in their hand, in their face, and just like they're completely oblivious to the outside world around them. Whereas sometimes just put your phone away, just look in nature. Great, perfect, because you just that's such a calming sensation, and you just start to just look around and be just a lot more aware of your surroundings. It's super important, but it's not something which we naturally do.
Because it goes back to, like you're saying, people are terrified of just be sitting in silence, and actually going and listening to that inner voice, or dealing with inner work. We want the distractions. I hate myself for saying the Kardashians. I hate the fact that they become famous rather than a nurse who's helping somebody with COVID. And, it's, we make all this bullshit in front of ourselves to hide the fact of dealing with the stuff that's holding us back. We want to think, it's like you were saying, it's stop expecting to find the solution elsewhere. It's just accept it's within you. You just need to find that nugget, that thing to start changing. So how do you start working with a client? If somebody, I know you're going to get a lot of fans from this, but if somebody wanted to work with you or find a coach, to start them on the journey, how do we find the right coach, and how does a transformational mindset coach help us on this journey?
I think, there's so many coaches out there. Everyone's doing fantastic work, and obviously anyone who's a coach is helping other people is doing some great stuff. I always say, do you resonate? Do you resonate with that person? I think it's one of the biggest things. Is like, if someone's, obviously people. Well, I'm quite open about my background and what I've been through, and if someone can resonate with that, or they've been through some similar challenges, then I always say to them, yeah, get in touch. But if someone really wants, help for quite a while, I always did coaching, be it male or female, like, it didn't really matter. I only concentrate on men now, because I found it, I can resonate with that more so. I have had clients who are women, but it's a bit more. I can do the work, but I can have more of an impact on a male, because naturally I can resonate with some of the way they feel, or some of the situations they've been in.
Oh, that makes sense.
So for me, I only do obviously male coaching now, but I say, do you resonate with someone? Do you resonate with their story? Do you know with their background? Because I think that's super important. If someone, wanted help with, the fact that, their children are on drugs or something like that, and they had all this stuff, like, I'm probably not the right coach, because I've not really had that experience. Obviously I've had a son for a very, very short period of time, but I don't have that experience. If someone wants to come for someone who's, naturally been through depression, been through anxiety, suicidal thoughts, low self-esteem, low confidence, high anxiety, may have been through some grief, may have been through some loss, may have even had, situations like myself where they found themselves in a, kind of a criminal type situation, or spent time, in prison or jail, so all this type of stuff. Yeah, I'm probably a pretty good coach to work with, because I can resonate and been through those similar challenges. So that's what I always say to people is, do you resonate with someone's story?
No, I love that. I mean, that's why I know you're helping so many people. I mean, just your social media alone, you see the changes. Some people say is like, well, I found your stuff and it's completely changed me, and I feel so stronger and more able to take on the world. And there's so much love and in the comments. But what do you suggest we do because as we're going to make these changes, we're going to fuck up, we're going to do stupid things as we're trying to find our real versions of ourselves. How should we deal with rejection, making mistakes? Maybe it doesn't go the way we want it to. How should we analyze it and learn from it, rather than going, there's another example of why I'm stupid, and say, oh, wait, no, that's just went wrong because I was resisting it, or it was the wrong fit for me, or, how do we see mistakes now rather than beating ourselves up?
I mean, a lot of it goes back to kind of the ego, really. That's where like rejection in particular is obviously it cripples people, but naturally, if you don't put yourself in a situation where you are getting rejected on a day-to-day basis, you're always going to struggle with that. And no one likes rejection, don't get me wrong, but you have to embrace it. And a lot of the time, it's really the ego that's hurt rather than you as a person. So I've done a video on rejection and said, one of the biggest things I did was to just start walking up to, women in the street, saying that they're attractive and did they want to go for a drink, and obviously you got obviously you get a lot of rejections there, right? But you just once you've done 2, 3, 4, 5, it just don't matter. Don't take it personally. Take it against me as a person that they, because most of the time no one's giving a negative reaction, but it's just more like you just move on to the next one. And obviously, I speak to people all the time. Like, they don't want me as a coach. No, they're not going to resonate. That's a rejection. Yeah, okay, that's cool. Let's move on to the next one. I don't take it personally. I don't take it against me. I just say, my ego hates it. My ego will be always like making a fuss and like, but I know how to differentiate that from my ego and just and not take it as a personal against me as a person. It's just, sometimes you're not going to resonate with people, right? You're not going to resonate with everyone. Not everyone's going to think you're great. Not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to think you're attractive. Not everyone's going to want to go out with you. It's just, that's, once you separate yourself from that kind of ego within you, then but you have to get rid of it. You have to really, in a way, develop an ego to get rid of it. But, it's just putting yourself, that's why I did stand-up comedy, because ego hated it, but I loved it. Sometimes I didn't get a laugh. Sometimes I did get a laugh. Big deal. I didn't care. And it's the same, like, you have to, I saw one person who was talking about, he went into McDonald's and he ordered a big Whopper, which obviously is Burger King. And he just was adamant that he wanted a Whopper in a McDonald's, and he kept on just saying it and said, "No, sir, no, sir." Like, you just go, so no, I want a Whopper. You get me one. I don't, blah, blah, blah. And he held up a queue, and people were probably like screaming at him, thinking, this guy's a right idiot, blah, blah, blah. And he walked out of there and he said he felt amazing. Like, ego absolutely hated it, but he felt amazing. And it's just and you have to do those things. You just have to put yourself in a situation where it's going to be super uncomfortable. And your ego is going to hate it, but you will break through so many limitations.
I love it. I think we could talk for days. I mean, this is why I knew it was going to be one of these podcasts. It's like, we need a round 2, we need a round 3, because you're such a great guy that I could ask questions all day, and I think we would just be scratching the surface, because as guys, there's so many things we need to deal with. But what would you want somebody to take from this? Because I know we're over our time now, but what would you want them to take as a message, a sum up message, before we can do another one, before we can go into deep stuff? How would you want men to remember, or, is there homework you would get them to do just now, or is there just a mindset you want them to approach life with from now?
Yeah, I mean, anything to take away would be, our new future is always available. You can always change the person in the mirror, and you can be who you want to be, and really through that, it's being able to really start analyzing your thoughts and emotions, and really understand that that's all they are. They're not you. You are not your thoughts or your emotions. I mean, we can go a lot deeper and start talking about you're not your body, or you're not. You can really start. Which we won't go into, but really, like, understanding you're not your thoughts or emotions, and kind of a new future is always always available. And I always say, 4 or 5 years ago, I was not this person. This person really was, you know, massive anxiety, depression, suicidal, and huge, like, not self confident, no self esteem. And just by doing these inner work, let's say start with meditation, to start with doing a little bit of breath work, through visualizations, all these, gratitude is obviously a huge one, and just be able to, start understanding who you are a bit more. But I think reaching out, and I think you've talked about that already. Like, people have reached out to you and on email and stuff. That's hugely important. That was where probably the biggest change I had, was I phoned the Samaritans, right? Back in 4 or 5 years ago, and that made a monumental difference, because I realised I could actually speak to someone, and I was, as men, we're quite private. No one really, don't really speak, we don't really share our thoughts and feelings like you said. And that was a big change for me. So I always say to people, like, just reach out to someone. It could, and actually, it's best to be someone who's completely anonymous. Like, not a friend, or not a partner, or an acquaintance. Like, actually, phone like Samaritans. Get in contact with someone like myself, because it makes a massive difference when you can do that, especially if someone who at least knows, how to listen, not judge, not give you advice or try to project their story onto you or anything. Like, someone who's just prepared to, to listen, and really listen, is super important.
And do you find that, like, just by letting it out, it kind of releases the energy, it releases its hold? You're no longer letting it kind of be like a face hugger from Alien. You're no longer letting it just latch onto you, because you're kind of releasing it out.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. I mean, when you're supposed to speak to someone and you can get what you have within you, especially if you're keeping it within you, you're not sharing it with anyone, and you're keeping it from people who you're living with or associate with, it's very, very destructive. And so if you can just be able to have a conversation with someone, I always say, yeah, try. It is actually best to have it with someone who's doesn't know you. He's completely, has no previous, like I did with the kind of the Samaritans and stuff. And when people to me, because I found people a lot more, a lot more open. I mean, even had someone knock on my door the other day, and he was obviously, selling me something, and we just started chatting, and he told me his life story, like within like 10, 15 minutes, he just straight off. And but that's something which has just come because, I probably have that kind of, just that sense now a little bit more, where people are a bit more, they share and they're open a lot more, just because maybe because of the vibe I give off. But I think it's super important to be able to, to speak to someone. But I would always recommend it's actually best if it's someone who doesn't know you, really.
Because I think if you remove the emotion, it can help so much. And even if it's something like breathing space, or like Samaritans or the Red Cross, there's always some. I mean, I interviewed David Hayes. He was convicted criminal, came out, and he said the number of times people said to him, "You're just going to be a prisoner. You're just a number." And he was like, "Well, no, they're real people." And he said, just writing a CV for somebody who's getting out to go for a job made them suddenly feel like there was somebody there to support them, that they weren't their past. I think was it Jake the Snake Roberts that said, "Your past is not your destiny, that you can change regardless of what it is." And I think that hit a lot of people, because you're not your thoughts, you're not your convictions, you're not your whatever it is. It's like you're saying, there is a better future for us. And that's why I'm so glad there's amazing people like you putting this stuff out, because how many guys are getting help just now going, I don't know where to go. And they find you on social media, And like you're saying, you're somebody they don't know that they can write to and ask for help, take you on as ask to you take them on as a client. So until we can get around to, I could talk to you for another 3 days, I think, but how would you want people to get in touch with you? How can we follow you on social media? How can we, see? I'm assuming you'll be doing TED Talks soon. I'm assuming you'll be having the books out. How can we follow this amazing journey you're on?
So probably the best. I mean, at the moment, probably the best for me is, and actually Instagram is probably one of my most active. But actually Twitter. Actually now I do spend most of my time on there, and most content I put on there now. I'm more into. I like writing and video. To be honest with you, I like both. But obviously, so I do both. But I do enjoy the work I do on Twitter, so I'd always reach out on there.
What's your Twitter handle?
Twitter handle is at James C. Peters, and at Instagram is James Peters Lifestyle.
Well, that's it for another week, and thank you for listening. It's now time to take what you've learned and use it to develop and enhance your life with the key points mentioned. Listen, try it, embrace it, use it, and crush it. Now's your time to hit that next level in your life. If you liked this episode, then please leave a comment on the show notes or a review of the show on your podcast platform. Everything helps evolve the show. Until next week, keep seeking the next level in your life.